Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon, and we're going to talk about DC Comics. There was another fandom event over the weekend, and I gotta tell you, I'm looking at what's coming down the pipeline for DC, and I have a bad feeling about this. I have a really bad feeling about DC. I think they're going to repeat some of the same mistakes that Marvel Comics did from 2015 to 2017, and I think we're going to wind up with pretty much the same results, right? So before we get into it, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. It definitely helps the channel. We do talk about comics, we talk about animation, we talk about movies, TV, anime, whatever interests us that day. Now, let's wind the clock back a couple of years to 2015 and Marvel Comics' ill-advised, ill-conceived plan to bring new readers to comics, a more diverse audience to comics, as they call it, and they basically threw the baby out with the bathwater. They did this Marvel Now stunt, which they saw them replacing pretty much all of the main characters at the same time during the height of popularity for the MCU. And so people would go to the comic shops and they'd be looking for, Steve Rogers or Tony Stark, and they would find replacement characters. And it did not go well. It led to a massive decline in sales of Marvel Comics, and it ultimately came to a head in 2017 or so, and it led to the termination of then editor Axel Alonso. It was a very, very bad year for Marvel, and I think, as I understand it, Disney was even getting involved and being like, what the hell is going on over there, guys? What are you doing? Why do we look bad? Why are we reading these bad headlines? And it did wind up with a major shuffle at the top at Marvel, and they did roll back a lot of the decisions to switch out characters to other characters, and they brought it back to center and brought back a lot of the old favorites and tried to undo some of the damage. I think Secret Empire was one of the biggest FUs to the fans. They tried to undo some of that damage, I guess. But Marvel's never been quite the same since then. And now, if you fast forward to what's going on at DC Comics right now, of course, DC had their editorial staff gutted, absolutely gutted by Warner Media and AT&T. That Dan DiDio got gone. We had Bob Harris leave early. We had several editors get gone, and now they're bringing in a new general manager, and it seems like they're changing focus. We talk about this book a lot because this is pretty much what I think the future of DC Comics is going to look like in a nutshell. This Wonder Women of history that's supposed to be about historical figures, and it's mostly about celebrities and politicians, all of them Democrats, and the art looks like something from Tumblr, not even Tumblr level. And this is supposed to be a DC Comics book, and then we had the Batman reboot one-off YA graphic novel that had a lot of buzz, and they made some changes to it for whatever reason. Batman's an Asian kid now, and Alfred's an eccentric gay Asian. It's just like, I don't know what the deal was with this book. And again, that was kind of an Elseworlds thing. It was kind of its own thing, but it does seem like DC Comics is moving in that direction now. The big thing that was discussed for the last year or so was 5G, which sounded to me a lot like what Marvel did in 2015, which led to a colossal failure. Switching out all of the well-loved, well-known superheroes for new characters just in the name of diversity. So there are better ways to do this than to just switch out all the old favorites. You got to keep the money coming in. And you can switch out a character here and there, but you can't switch everybody out at once. It never works, and it looks like a bunch of pandering. But they've apparently nixed this, but I don't think it's completely gone. Jim Lee confirmed again that 5G isn't happening at DC Fandom, coming from Bleeding Cool. But this is what gets me. They talked about how they're not going to do it, and it kind of died when Dan DiDio got gone from DC Comics. But this is the thing. Jim Lee said that there was no 5G project happening, though in doing so confirmed that it was at one point, rather than a reboot relaunch, that DC Comics now wants to focus on individual titles. But this is what he says. He said, instead of throwing it all away in a month and renumbering the line and going for that short-term spike in sales, as was originally planned, Jim Lee states that certain aspects of 5G that were liked would instead be incorporated in an organic way going forward, and to look forward to some of them in 2021, just not tied up to one big event. What do I think this means? I think this means they're still going to swap out the old superheroes for more diverse characters that are just not going to make it a big event. I think we're going to see a different Batman, a different Superman, possibly a different Wonder Woman, and I think they're going to do this. It's basically going to be 5G or parts of 5G just snuck in. So they're not announcing it with a megaphone that this is what they're going to do, but this is what they're going to do. It doesn't matter if they do it as an event, though, or if they just, suddenly start swapping out characters for no good reason. The fans probably aren't going to take to it that well. And we're probably going to wind up where Marvel was in 2017, where it was so bad that the Hollywood Reporter had to report on how bad Marvel dropped the ball. And this was kind of the first death knell, or one of the death knells for the modern comic book industry, the direct market, was Marvel dropping the ball so badly in 2017. Now, start putting this together with some of the people they've been hiring lately, and there are some people like Mark Waid who haven't been welcome at DC Comics for quite some time. Mark Waid is, of course, very activist-minded. He's very opinionated, and he has not been welcome at DC Comics for like 12 or 15 years. Suddenly he's back. We're going to talk about that, but I want to talk first about Daniel Cherry, who is the new general manager, I guess, of DC Comics. Now, he put a statement out the other day where, and I did do a video about this, where I said DC's learned nothing, and I'm 100% convinced they've learned absolutely nothing. Daniel Cherry put a statement out, I think on his LinkedIn, where he said, while always respecting the past, I also think it's our responsibility to leverage the cultural power of DC Comics and our characters to entertain and inspire an increasingly diverse global fan base. Comics have had the unique power to create resonant imagery and narratives that can move the world toward a better, more inclusive version of itself. That sounds like he's very keen to use the DC Comics platform for activism. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I was like, well, maybe not. Maybe he's just talking, we got to have, more diverse characters, whatever, and we'll do it in a less ham-fisted fashion. And that's fine. But you go out to his Twitter profile. Social activist right in his bio. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. So he is an activist. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen is more Wonder Women of history. I think we're going to have more characters being swapped out. I think DC Comics has learned nothing. Now, more evidence that we're basically going to be Marvel Comics circa 2017 is some of the people that are leaving DC, apparently, and some of the people who are coming in. Now, this is very interesting. This again coming from Bleeding Cool. DC Comics December solicitations note that Brian Bendis' run on Superman and Action Comics are ending in December. I think a lot of people are actually going to be excited about that. I haven't read very much of it. I think I checked out the first issue, and then it just, everybody's like, it's terrible. Don't bother. And this was after statements Brian Bendis made in June saying he would be staying on the Superman titles at DC for a long time. So he might be out the door. Grant Morrison's run on Green Lantern is ending, and he won't be continuing on Green Lantern with no replacement project lined up. Scott Snyder's Death Metal is coming to an end, and we're going to talk about that because I think that's what Mark Waid might be taking over. He has his creator-owned American Vampire at DC, but nothing else is announced. Tom King, who tried to tie Jay Lee to a hate group. He has Rorschach, he has Batman, Catwoman, and Strange Adventures for 12 issues each, but don't expect any similar big deals to follow. Jeff Johns brought the noise with Doomsday Clock and 3 Jokers. Nothing is lined up. So this is really interesting that these are, I guess, the top writers at DC Comics and it looks like their future is in question. You know, and Rich Johnson's even like, what's going on here? These are all writers who DC Comics wooed and threw money at to write for them. These were expensive deals, but they helped DC grab market shares and get headlines. That's true. DC Comics actually did better as Marvel continued to double down on product that comic book fans really didn't want. DC Comics kept bringing it. They kept, putting out excellent books. They did not seem as political as Marvel Comics was, and they did very well. In fact, most of the top-selling books for the last couple of years have been DC books. Batman books in particular have done really well. But, this looks like it's going to end. And I don't know if they're going to go. Now, he's speculating they might go back to Marvel. I don't know if they will go back to Marvel, because I don't know if Disney has the money when they're paying their editors like $30,000, $40,000 a year in New York. I don't know if Disney has the money right now to bring these guys back in. I think the best bet for any of these guys, honestly, is to just do creator-owned. I could see Scott Snyder and Tom King and maybe Jim Lee get the hell out of DC and go start another Image Comics type thing, because I think that's going to be the future for, I guess, old school comics, because DC is not going to be the same. And Jim Lee looks pretty miserable, doesn't he? This face says, like, Jim Lee he's a pet. They're keeping him on as a pet. They got to have some street cred, right, as they do this, as they turn DC Comics upside down. But they're going to keep Jim Lee on as a pet because they know the fanboys like him. He's pretty much a household name in comic circles. He's well respected. And they can't just completely turn DC upside down without making it look like they're at least giving some kind of a half-assed effort to please the old school fans. But that's not what they're going to do. This is the future of DC Comics right here, guys. And it happens so quickly. This is the guy running DC Comics, guys. Social activist. Now, if you start looking at who they're bringing back to DC Comics, Mark Waid. Mark Waid is coming back to DC Comics after 12 years. Mark Waid, who took a sharp left turn into activismville, a couple of years ago, and is currently involved in a lawsuit, by the way, with a YouTuber, your boy Zach, for tortious interference, because he felt it was his place to, I guess, make sure that this guy could not work anywhere in comics. And if he decided to work for a smaller publisher or crowdfund, they were going to try to stop him there as well. But he's coming back to DC after like 12 or 15 years. Yeah, he hasn't been there since 2008. And I heard that the reason he wasn't allowed at DC, this is just what I've heard, is, he butted heads with people there. He was kind of caustic to work with. Nobody wanted to work with him. But, Mark Waid, who is sort of the ringleader, I guess, of the kind of anti-YouTuber comics movement, is coming back to DC Comics. That's huge, because that means that they don't really give a shit what YouTubers think. Apparently, they don't care what comic book fans think. They're going to hire who they're going to hire. And I got to wonder if Daniel Cherry, social activist, didn't just have Mark Waid on speed dial, or as soon as Dan DiDio got pushed out the door, here comes Mark Waid. I don't know how that worked, how far ahead it was planned, but it seemed like it happened awfully fast. According to Reddit, he had a falling out with DC, particularly Dan DiDio and Bob Harras. And Waid didn't get along with Bob Harras. Bob Harras left DC Comics earlier than he was supposed to. He's like, I'm not training my replacements. I'm out of here, guys. Who else is coming to DC Comics? It has done some writing for DC Comics, but who is in the December solicitations is Mags Visaggio. Mags Visaggio, who's been kind of kicking it around indie publishers for a while. Mags, again, very much an activist, very loud on Twitter. Hasn't done a whole lot for DC. I wasn't sure if she'd done much of anything. I guess she did Eternity Girl and a couple of things here and there. But now Mags had some controversy because she was accusing Sean Gordon Murphy of love bombing, whatever the hell that. What is that? What is love bombing? We used to call it like sucking up, buttering up, I guess. But love bombing, I guess, is when you praise people too much and then you do it to benefit yourself or something. I don't know. But it got really weird. I remember it getting really, really weird. And even people that have defended Mags were on Twitter like, what the hell? This is kind of this is getting kind of creepy and kind of close to like trying to make a connection between showing a lot of affection or a lot of attention toward a creator and that being kind of like a Me Too thing. It was very, very weird. But yeah, apparently Mags is coming back to DC too. So what I'm telling you guys is the more things change, the more they stay the same. And DC was kind of the last hope I think mainstream comics had. And I think that hope is gone at this point. I think this is it. I think this is the last hurrah. This is the hill that the big two want to die on. And they're basically creating comics for Portland and Brooklyn at this point. I mean, that's what they're doing. You don't like the content, don't buy the content. I think a lot of people aren't going to be buying the content. And then what's going to happen is, DC is going to stop publishing monthly comics altogether. And they're going to be like, boo hoo hoo, it was coronavirus that killed off the comic book industry. And really, it was stuff like this that kind of is going to kill off the comic book industry and some hiring decisions that are kind of questionable. I don't know. It's a mess, guys. So I would say right now the action is with indie comics for sure. And if you don't like the comics being made, go make your own comics. Find another way. I think there's going to be a whole nother industry that grows up alongside of the mainstream out of necessity because Marvel and DC clearly don't get it. A lot of these indie publishers don't get it. So I'm going to wrap it up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, and we'll talk later.